In the previous sections, we learned how to use a number of programs and a number of services that help us improve our anonymity and privacy. We also learned how to access hidden services or onion services, or what's known as the dark net, and we learned how to use some of these services and some of these websites. In all of these sections, we used an operating system called Tails, and as mentioned, this is a live and amnesic operating system that is based on a fully patched and hardened Linux distro. It routes all traffic through the Tor network, so it's relatively secure and it's relatively private. We installed it on a USB stick, so we used that USB stick to boot into it from any computer, and then as soon as we shut down that computer or pull the USB stick out, everything will be wiped from that computer and it will remove all traces. So all in all, it's a pretty nice package. It's very portable, very convenient, and that's why I chose to use it in all of the previous sections, because it provides relative security and good privacy and anonymity, as long as you don't make any OPSEC mistakes, such as logging in to an account that is tied to your identity or interacting with other accounts that can be linked to your real identity. Now this is all great, but note that I said relative security. I said that because we can do better. See, the problem with Tails and most operating systems is the fact that everything is running under one domain. So if a hacker manages to hack into this computer, whether it's running Tails or any other operating system, they'll get access to this whole domain, and first of all, they'll be able to bypass whatever anonymity measures you're using, and they'll be able to easily de-anonymize you. And they'll also have access to all of your files and be able to control the computer and do anything that you can do as a user. So even if you're using the greatest anonymity methods and you're using different proxies and Tor and VPNs and all of that, if somebody hacks into your computer, it's game over. All of that can be bypassed easily. That's why security is very, very important, and that's why it's linked to privacy. You can't be private or anonymous if you're not secure. A good solution to this problem that can improve our security is to use different computers for different tasks. For example, use one computer for work-related tasks, use one computer for your personal-related stuff, use another one for the untrusted stuff whenever you're just browsing through websites and opening attachments and so on. Use one computer that is not connected to the internet to store your passwords and keys. This way, if somebody manages to hack into one of these computers, they'll only get access to one computer, and it'll be very difficult for them to move from this computer and compromise the other computers. Not only that, but the fact that you have an untrusted computer that you don't do any personal or work stuff on means that this will be the computer that will probably be hacked, not the other ones. So all of your important stuff in work and personal will not be hacked, and the hackers will not be able to gain access to them. Also, if you're using a separate identity on this untrusted computer, then your real identity or the identities that you use on work and personal, again, will not be compromised. So this is a really, really good solution. The only problem is it's not cheap. You need a number of computers, and it's also not easy to achieve. So imagine having to use a different computer every time you want to do a different task. You can make this slightly easier and use one computer, but use multiple Tails USB sticks, and again use each one of them for a separate domain, one for work, one for personal work, one for untrusted. But again, this is not very usable because, let's say, for example, you are using the work USB stick and you opened your work email, you're reading an email and there is an attachment, and you really want to open that attachment, but you can't really trust that attachment because it could be anyone. It could be a hacker pretending to be a friend, or it could be someone who gained access to your friend's account. So, if you want to follow this model and if you want to be secure, you need to boot into the untrusted distro or the untrusted USB stick and open the attachment there. Then, once you open it and read it, if it's fine, you need to turn this off, boot back into your work USB stick, your work domain, and then reply to the email. So you can see that if you're doing this every day, it's not very practical and it's going to become very, very annoying. This is where the idea of Qubes came from. Qubes is an operating system that is designed to improve security by compartmentalization. So, as soon as you boot into this operating system, it boots into Zen, which is a hypervisor, and then once the operating system starts, everything inside this operating system is separated into different domains. You'll have a domain for work, a domain for personal, an untrusted domain, and so on. And each one of these domains is a completely separate virtual machine. So you can think of these virtual machines like completely separate computers, and hence the name virtual machine. So each one of these virtual machines has its own RAM, its own CPU, its own file system, and so on, and is completely unaware of the other virtual machines. So just like running different computers, if your untrusted virtual machine or the untrusted domain gets compromised or hacked, it is very difficult for a hacker to move from there to your work or to your personal virtual machine. Not only that, but Qubes also separate other system components into virtual machines. So you have your networking, your file system, your USB controller, and your firewall all running inside their own virtual machines. So if a hacker manages to exploit a vulnerability in any of these components, then only get access to this isolated virtual machine that is not even aware of the existence of your work and your personal domains and so on. And with this, you won't need to have multiple computers, and you won't need to keep restarting and booting into different USB sticks. You'll always be using the same operating system, and the different virtual machines will be running inside this one single operating system. Now, these nice features come at a price. Qubes is very resource hungry and has specific requirements. I'm going to include these requirements in the resources of this lecture, so please go through them before attempting to install it. Now, before moving into the next lectures where I'm going to show you how to install Qubes and use it, I know right now you're thinking, do I really need to install Qubes? And the answer really depends on you and your threat model. With Qubes, we're not going to be using any other magical methods to become more anonymous, so you'll still be using Tor, you can still use a VPN and multiple proxies. Nothing that you can't do in Tails. The only difference is the added security that Qubes allows by compartmentalization. Therefore, if someone targets you specifically trying to de-anonymize you, they're less likely to be able to hack into your computer or to gain access to it and therefore de-anonymize you. So Qubes is only more anonymous and more private because it is more secure. It makes it more difficult to hack into your computer and therefore more difficult to de-anonymize you. So, whether you should use Qubes or Tails really depends on your threat model. If you think there are people that will actively try to hack into your computer in order to de-anonymize you, then obviously Qubes is a better solution because it's a more secure operating system. Other than that, Tails is good enough as long as you don't make any OPSEC mistakes, such as communicating with accounts linked to your identity, and as long as you use it within one domain. So you don't need to use Tails for work, personal, and for browsing. You're only using it to access the darknet for research or for other reasons. Then in that case, Tails can be good enough. So, just like anything else in this course, go through the Qube section, understand how it works and why it's useful, and at the end, based on your threat model and based on what you want to do, make a decision on what's best in your case.